All right, welcome back, everybody, to a new edition of the Planning Pulse. My name's Bo Mellon, joined with you as always, my good friend and co-host Matt Harvison. We're really liking the new stride of the Planning Pulse, where we're doing kind of series of great things to do inside of Adaptive. Well, the new series that we're going to be focusing on is workforce planning inside of Adaptive. A lot of people think about adaptive planning and they only think financial planning and analysis. They only think FP&A. Well, at Active Cyber, we like having the entire company leverage adaptive. So, what is something that is a big cost driver and a big strategic initiative for a lot of firms we work with? Well, that's managing their workforce in an appropriate fashion and doing it in an efficient manner. That's where workforce planning comes in. So for the next, we have 4 episodes that we're going to be doing on workforce planning. When we implement for customers, a lot of times we do crawl, walk, run approach. Our episodes are going to follow a similar process. We're going to kind of intro workforce planning, and then we're going to get a little bit more advanced into some of the nuances in a workforce planning environment. And then from there, we're going to get into the cream of the crop of what do we really see people leveraging workforce planning to its fullest capability do. Lastly, Workday is a full enterprise software suite, and their HCM product is something that interacts with workforce planning instead of adaptive very well. So we will be closing this series out with an episode strictly on the connection back to Workday HCM. So that's kind of going to be the nuance here for the next, 4 episodes here. Matt, maybe we start and I ask you, when you think of workforce planning, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, and Bo, really excited for this series. I completely agree. I think going through this mini series sort of a setup, it allows us to sort of start high level and then expand into more topics. Workforce planning is certainly no exception to that. When we think of workforce planning, you mentioned most organizations have this initiative of getting better with tracking their personnel and their headcount related costs. Almost every organization that we talk with is spending between 70 to sometimes a little over 80% of all of their expenses are related to labor, right?
Hmm.
So what is the cost of their workforce at any given point in time? It's a critical component for every organization that we work with. So getting a good understanding for that is really the foundation for establishing a good workforce planning process. But when we start to talk really about what the difference is between the financial aspect of workforce planning into true strategic workforce planning, it's assessing the talent that we have on board, right? Looking at our overall supply of our workforce, getting into what is our forecasted demand on our workforce. Now, that demand could be done differently from organization to organization. It could be based off of utilization or availability or internal initiatives or
Hmm.
call volumes in a call center. So, a lot of different ways that we can look at demand. We're going to dig into that as well. But really assessing the gap that exists between supply and demand, and then looking into strategies for how do we fill that gap. So, we're going to talk about buy, build, borrow scenarios. We're going to look at recruiting metrics. We're going to look at do we have the right workers in the right place at the right time? If we're overstaffed in a particular area, how are we looking at employees who exceed expectations or some of those who maybe don't quite meet expectations? So, a lot to be done inside of workforce planning. I'm excited that we've got 4 particular really ideas or concepts behind the series that we're going to be driving into today. One of those things that we'd be really missing out on talking is who performs the workforce planning process. So, Bo, I know you have a lot of conversations with folks on a
Yeah.
daily basis about workforce planning. When you're meeting with people, who are you typically talking to about workforce planning?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's become a part of my job that I really like working with Adaptive is maybe even when I first started kind of working with the product 4 years ago, I really only ever thought we'd be talking with people in the finance organization. Over the years, I've met with every type of department, and in the workforce planning aspect of it, a lot of times we're working with maybe an HRIS admin, people in the recruiting department, some other folks on the staffing side, maybe even sometimes more people on an analytical basis than strictly just an FP&A team or a CFO or a financial analyst or an accounting admin, whatever the case may be, right? A lot of those folks start getting into adaptive and they start understanding the power of doing workforce planning. Because much like finance today, a lot of those people on those departments we just hit on are also just working inside of Excel or working inside of a Google Sheets. And whatever use case you're leveraging, you're gonna, eventually hit a lot of those scalability issues that we've covered in the past with working inside of Excel or Google Sheets. So it's a much more collaborative process with maybe an HR manager, a recruiting manager, system admins on the ATS or HRIS side. It's nice because we get to work with a lot of different people. Now, don't get me wrong, the last thing I'll close before I maybe kick it back to you, Matt, is since you hit on the fact that the personnel expense is the largest, item on P&L, right, on the expenses side, it's still a pretty finance involved activity. So there are times, right, where it's the finance department just having a lot more collaboration with the HR team because through these conversations over the years, right, sometimes it's hard for them to be on the same page. So when we're bringing the finance team and the HR team together inside of a workforce planning environment, it allows for a lot smoother collaboration where they can be aligned much easier and distribute out information in an efficient manner. So really kind of marrying those two departments together is where we see a lot of our customers do this process, Matt.
Yeah, and I agree with you. The underlying theme is collaboration, continuous collaboration across the organization, right? We have our HR team who is continuously planning for our existing workforce and then the needs or demands of that workforce. People coming, people going. How is our finance team going to react? Finance is a little bit more static in that it's looking at it, for the annual operating plan, the monthly or quarterly reforecast that's being performed. But our HR analysts and our HRIS team, it's a daily process, right? People are putting in their 2 weeks notice, or people are getting promoted or asking to work remotely. There are so many changes that happen across an organization that it's not something we can look at on a snapshot basis once a month or once a quarter and get a good understanding of where we sit. So a lot of times, to your point, it is HR operations, but we're still bringing finance into the fold to really get a good understanding. So we do recommend most often for this to be performed in another alternative instance of Workday Adaptive Planning, but then again, communicating that information back and forth. That way,
Mhm.
HR only sees HR related data, FP&A team only sees FP&A related data. So we're not having too much of an intermixed data sharing situation there. But before we get too much further into it, as you all know, having watched the podcast before, some of the important things that we like to hit on whenever we're going through is actual a true demonstration of the platform itself. When we're talking about really headcount and cost related management, when we think of workforce planning, again, this is that supply side. This is that hub and spoke type environment that exists inside of workforce planning. The first step that most of our customers are unable to do is really understand what their current workforce looks like. We don't know what our workforce is at any given point in time. We have static data that we're sending out to our Excel files, or we have maybe we've got just some downloads that we're taking out to Excel, and then we don't update it again until the next quarter or maybe halfway through the year. It's really hard for us to get an accurate look at what sort of where we stand today. So this is where we start when we think of workforce planning. It's generating our existing workforce plan or getting a view of what our current roster looks like. Now, inside of Adaptive, this may be a sheet that a lot of you are familiar with if you've worked with Workday Adaptive Planning before in the past. If you haven't, this particular sheet is called a model sheet. What that really means is that we've got a lot of rows with column-based information. The columns are all facts about these different employees that we've got. So for example, Todd Hardy here has an employee ID. He's got a particular role or job profile. What all of those different fields allow us to do is to be able to report, pivot, filter, drill down on all of our related calculations and see what our total makeup is of salary, benefit, tax related, or headcount related information pertaining to these different facts. So as an example, if I wanted to see, my total headcount of project managers, or if I wanted to see costs related to administrative workers, or a breakdown of headcount between employees and contingent workers, by having these fields, it allows me to easily do that. Now, how do we get data into a sheet like this? There's a number of different ways that we do it. I know, Beau, you talk to customers all the time about integrating data from their source
Mhm.
system. You don't have to have Workday HCM to bring data into a sheet like this one. We have a lot of customers who operate on, like a UKG or an UltiPro or a Bamboo HR. What are some systems that you hear outside of those, Beau? Anything that
Yeah.
maybe you can list off there?
Outside of the ones you said, it's a lot of the different pay, right? Paycom, Paychex, Paylocity, Paycor, Paycom, right? All of those we can integrate to, whether that's an API or an SFTP, push or pull. It's just a nice option, Matt, our customers have because there's really three great ways to interact and get data into this specific model. And I really like working with these modeled sheets as well. For new customers just adopting the tool, it's not a learning curve, right? This is a model anyone can come in and quickly understand where to make their edits and drop down and find the values they need to work in. The three ways people really enter the data is you can click directly on somebody, open up that drop down and make an edit, right? You can go on in and find the right employee. You can go ahead and you can click that little plus button on the top, add row, and go add a completely new employee, right? If Matt selects that, then down at the bottom, now we can add a new individual. We can also integrate directly to a source system, so we can go in and map the fields in a report from your HRIS or applicant tracking system, map it to whatever custom configured columns you all have. They'll integrate in on a scheduled cadence. The other option that I think is really popular and probably what we see most out of the gate is a customer will go ahead and we give them an import template. They populate it up instead of a CSV file and import it back into the system. Out of the gate, a lot of customers eventually go back and integrate to their HRIS, but in an initial implementation, if this is a once or a twice a month activity, it's really seamless to be able to download that template and just flat file the data in, Matt. So one of the nice things about these modeled sheets is there's just a lot of quick and easy ways to also get data in the system and interact with it.
Absolutely. And you hit on a lot of good points there. So in this example, instead of going in and just hitting the plus button, just really quickly went in and just identified that, maybe we're going to be hiring a few people in the start of 2025. Maybe we'll, stagger this throughout the course of the year. And, we're going to bring in some hourly employees, some salary employees, but you can just copy down. You don't have to go in one by one and hit the plus button if you don't want to, but there are a lot of different ways that we can get data into the sheet. But as you can see, really, this is as we're going through the planning process, we've identified that there's a new hire request that we need. So we go ahead, plug these two values in, and then save off my change. What happens when I make that change or make that save is these two new employees get added to our record. I've got these two open employees. As you'll see whenever I sort of minimize my screen here a little bit, is that we've got updates to our charts and our graphs and our dials. But immediately I've got the impact of these two new employees flowing all the way out to any type of other model or ancillary model I've got. So for finance, when we send this through, it'll update their financial records. For our HR team, because we're thinking of personnel as that sort of hub and spoke idea, is we can start to look at comp changes. We can look at office space that we've got available. So a lot of different things that we can do by adding these workers in. If you've ever seen me demonstrate before, whether financial planning or workforce planning, you know that one of my favorite features inside of Workday Adaptive Planning is inside of a modeled sheet like this one specifically. You saw that all we did was just add two new hires or two new open requests into a sheet. A lot of you are working inside of Excel workbooks today. And what that process looks like is you're going in, you're typing in new hire requests, you're putting in information, and then you're distributing this out to all your different teams. Your teams are going in, they're compiling data, and without fail, somebody's going to override some formulas that you've got in cells to help you identify what our cost and headcount metrics are for the upcoming year. What Workday Adaptive Planning actually does is it takes all of those underlying calculations, and let me move over here to 2025. You can see that I've started to pick up, okay, here's headcounts, here's partial headcount for that year, monthly salary, I've got taxes, I've got benefits, I've got merit-related calculations, all of these occurring in the background. What that means is your user who's making that new hire request never has to interact with any of the underlying calculations, whether they're financial related, headcount related, or even if they're starting to fill some of your personnel or workforce planning related actions. So ultimately, this sheet that we've got here, we go in, we interact with, we put in new hire requests, we put in terminations. For example, no attrition here we just talked about. Maybe if we want to terminate somebody as of 1/30/2025, or they put in their 2 weeks notice. Again, immediate impact to all of my charts, my graphs, my dials, really easy and able to get access and insight into all of my information. So as we think about the first step in workforce planning, it is critical to be able to understand where we are today. to be able to get into that next stage in workforce planning, which is getting into the supply and the demand, the buy, build, borrow scenarios, the skills-based analysis, project planning. If we don't have a good understanding of where we are today and how we can get data into Adaptive, it makes the next task almost impossible. So it's really important for us to start every workforce planning conversation with just the baseline. Let's get our data in, let's get it updated, let's get it synchronized with our system so that way we can start getting a true reflection of where our workforce is today.
Matt, I thought that was great. You're always master in the demo world. No, guys, that was the tip of the iceberg, right, for workforce planning. And when customers come to us, an immediate need is hey, we need to be able to track accurately our headcount, our salaries, our benefits, our taxes. That sheet and that dashboard Matt showed is going to do that really nicely for y'all. And then if you like the visualizations, we can just automate and send those out to all the different team leads on a scheduled cadence. And then they can quickly and easily go see their headcount, their salaries, their benefits, and their taxes for where you're at right now and where you're going to be 6 months from now. So when we think about workforce planning, right, that was us crawling today, which it was a great intro, and it's still a lot of quick value add wins for our customers that are sitting inside of a laborious Excel sheet today. This is all connected across every model, every report, every dashboard, our integrations, a lot of automation and synchronization and quick wins that you guys will have going forward and leveraging Adaptive for your workforce planning.
Yeah, I agree, Bo. You said tip of the iceberg. We at Active Cyber, we understand that workforce planning is not an easy process. We know that it's continuously changing. We know that it changes varies organization to organization. What we all can agree on is that getting an accurate representation of where you stand today should be an easy task for you. We
Yeah.
should be able to synchronize with your system. That's where we need to start. Then once we get an accurate representation of where we are today, then we can get into the fun stuff. The 12, 18, 36-month plan, skills-based analysis, project planning, which we're going to dive into in this mini series. But like Bo said, this is the tip of the iceberg. This is the starting point for us. If you are in a situation right now where you are downloading your roster into Excel, sending it out to your team, having everyone make changes, edits, spending weeks compiling, aggregating just to find out somebody overrid the data inside of those cells, reach out to us at sales@active.cyber.com. We'd love to help you sort of guide you through that first step of workforce planning.
Yeah, great. Well, Matt just listed off a lot of fun stuff that we're going to be going to get into in the future episodes. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and keep your head on a swivel for the rest of this mini series of workforce planning. We'll see you guys in the next one. You can go ahead and plan on it.